So today we have the Flame Warden, the Firebreaker, the Ember Guardian, the Blaze Battler, the Wildfire Whisperer, Ivan O'Neill from Madronus. They create wildfire resilient communities in a healthy forest. They essentially help you make your home more wildfire resilient or your property more wildfire resilient. So welcome, Ivan.
Thanks, Greg. Great to be here.
All right,
Appreciate you having me on.
yeah, I'm excited to dive in. I mean, I know a lot of your story, but I think a lot of other people get value from it. I guess maybe start with wildfires in general and how it's become such a widespread problem. You see it in California, Colorado, Canada last year, some places in South America and stuff. You posted Texas a couple weeks ago. Um, Talk us through the
Yeah.
cause.
Well, so it's really there's no one single cause. I think that's what's kind of challenging about this. It's really a confluence of factors. Climate change is certainly a big one. Some of the research I've seen out there from scientists suggests, climate changes are responsible for about maybe 25% of the increased risk. But a lot of it also comes down to choices that we make around land management and how we develop
Mhm.
our communities. And a lot of this goes back to historical times when the indigenous residents of the Americas used fire at a landscape scale to cultivate the plants and uh, resources they needed for their livelihoods. And as the cultural burning decreased, we just seen increased fuel buildup. And then, of course, how we've been managing our landscapes. We've been putting non-native plants in places they didn't used to be, and really packing in tree plantations really tightly to the point that when the climate does shift, now our wildlands are very vulnerable. And of course, with the prices of land and construction, folks are moving further and further away from the urban cores that puts them in proximity to these areas.
Yeah, it's pretty, just in the, I don't know, 2 years I've known you, the increase, just from my awareness of more wildfires and more, I guess, larger wildfires maybe, is extreme. All right, Ivan, start us off with your background, professional background, and how that leads into your company, Madronus.
Yeah, so I was living in San Francisco in 2017, 2018, and working in consumer technology, home security, home automation. Um, then the 2017 fire up in Sonoma County happened. And now in the place that I live, Santa Rosa, we lost 6,000 structures there in the Tubbs fire. The following year, the town of Paradise was destroyed, 18,000 homes and businesses lost in the Camp Fire. And that was just really this wake up call that inspired me to learn more. And then fast forward to 2020, I was ready for a new challenge professionally, and met my co-founder Aaron, who's a brilliant geospatial and data scientist. And together we launched this company, and along the way have built out such a great team that we're really fortunate to have working with us. Me personally, I really dove into this space. So I became a NFPA certified wildfire mitigation specialist. And I also recently renewed my wildland firefighter type 2 credential, which is a fancy way of saying they let me hold a shovel during prescribed burns. And then I serve on the board of directors for a community wildfire organization called Safer West County that's organizing communities in Western Sonoma County. So, really being part of the community and that we live in has been a big part of it. Yeah. And then the team overall, we've done over 2,000 home inspections so far, and we're just getting started.
That's awesome. I can imagine what the total number of home inspections you could do, because it's a massive number. For the uninitiated or those not living in high wildfire risk areas, what is home hardening or land management?
Yeah, so these are kind of wonky terms in our field. I think there's a branding exercise to be done at some point. But starting with land management, right? These are the choices we make about how we manage nature, the natural environment that surrounds our homes and our communities. It's as you know, a land management decision is to have a lawn, a green lawn in front of your house, or to plant succulents, or maybe a native pollinator friendly garden. At a larger scale, you know, we have a lot of ranches, we have a lot of parks, national forests around our communities, and how those are managed, the cycles of harvesting trees and what sizes, all of those are land management. Um, and you know, going back to the comment I made earlier, there's a great book called Tending the Wild, and it's written by Professor M. Cat Anderson, and she goes into the history of native stewardship of the land, and in California specifically. And I think that a lot of us have the impression that there was this concept of wilderness before the arrival of European Americans and colonial settlers. And that book really covers how nothing could be further from the truth. There was a lot of
Mm.
active management, and they used fire to steward and
Wow.
tend the land. On the home hardening side, that is a term for how do we manage the structure. So on land management, that's our exposure to risk, kind of like the hot cold knobs on the shower. We've got, you know, we can dial back the heat by reducing exposure, and we can kind of turn up the water on the cold side to guard against flames and embers and things that would attack our
Hmm.
home in a wildfire. So these are oftentimes small improvements that can be made to things like vents or gutter protection or where the fence is located and in the immediate area around the house.
Awesome. I know just some of the videos, which we'll cut some in here of just embers coming through your vents in your house or your foundation vents. You don't even think about embers being sucked in there, and then it's in your attic and catching on fire, and that's how it all jumps around,
Yeah.
which is you know, part of your job is educating people to know that and identify those spaces. How do you guys leverage technology in your assessment of space in homes?
So we really focus on the science, and the only silver lining I think that has come from the devastation that we've been seeing is that the science has come a long way. And some of our advisors were scientists and researchers who conducted a lot of that. And out of there, we now know what is very important and how wildfires attack homes. On the technology side, we use a lot of high resolution aerial imagery that allows us to analyze properties and their wildfire risks at kind of the larger scale. And then we use AI to identify things like vegetation or fences that are near structures, and things that right off the bat we can see that might be risk factors. And then we also have this app that is paired with an inspector network. And this trained wildfire risk expert can come out, and using our app, it really simplifies that entire process for doing an inspection, identifying the features, and then generating a treatment plan that ensures high quality results and a custom plan for each property owner.
Talk through, I know you're right now California based, but um, talk about how home insurance or property insurance, wildfires, what is that world look like today?
It's at least in California is really challenging. Many people. So just when we think about the numbers of homes that are threatened by wildfires, there's some good data out there suggests probably 1 in 5 U.S. homes will be exposed to a wildfire in the next 30 years. In California, that's a little over 2 million structures. In the Western United States, that's about 5.5 million. And unfortunately, as we've seen recently, you mentioned Canada last year, they had 45 million acres burned. That's about 6 times normal. And, the East Coast experienced what we've experienced out West. Um, this is not just a Western U.S. problem. So insurers are realizing that the existing risk maps don't work at the moment, and they're looking for tools. And so what's happening is it's a combination of factors: high interest rates, public policy and regulation, but then also increasing climate risks and inflation in the costs of
Yeah.
building new construction. So in California, it's very difficult to get a new policy right now. A lot of homes are falling out of escrow because the buyer can't find insurance. The state's insurer of last resort has doubled the number of policyholders in the last 3 years, and they're on pace to double again in 1 year. So
Wow.
that's becoming a real threat to the viability of the California insurance market. And there's some efforts happening to try and alleviate that. But then also, people are looking at insurers are looking at wildfire risk, and that is one of the primary drivers for why they're non-renewing people or not offering affordable policies.
Wow.
Fortunately, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, how does, I know you work with a lot of entities on the insurance side. How do they view, or how is it the uptick of, hey, if you're proactive as a property homeowner with home hardening, is it starting to at least be on their radar to help insurance companies say, all right, we can now feel better about insuring your different rates?
That's really been the missing piece in all this. Up until very recently, if you were a property owner, you were diligent, you're conscientious, and you did work and took action. There was no real way for an insurer to recognize that. And there's this new thing called the Wildfire Prepared Home Program. It's an actual certificate that you get from going through this process, and it's rigorous, but it actually means something. And it's recognized by about 70% of the insurers in California. So most of the big ones: State Farm, number one, Farmers, Allstate, Mercury, CSAA, AAA. And this certificate does a couple of things for you. One, it'll help you qualify for coverage. And there are a number of companies now that are requiring this in order to maintain or get coverage. It, under the state's rules, identifies things that insurers have to give you a premium discount for. And then it's valid for 3 years. And if you ever decide to sell your home, your buyer can go around and shop with that certificate. It stays with the property. So
Hmm.
it's increasingly a popular thing that property owners are getting.
Nice. I know it's been slow getting there, but at least there's movement, which leads to naturally to this next question around, you're working with insurance companies, you work with governments, local, federal, super local. You know, how do you as a company play in that space? Because there is action going on, and there's money being thrown at it, but I know it's not always easy to turn that into results.
Yeah.
How do you guys play in that space?
Yeah, so the software we've developed does a lot of things. It's really designed to address all of the challenges you're kind of talking about. We've got a number of different entities in here. There's different programs. There's rebates. There's tax credits. There's other things out there, and we help simplify all of that for property owners. And then we also have some government agencies who receive grants from, say, the federal government, or they pass a local tax measure, and they want to offer education and outreach in their communities, and maybe some rebates for folks who do things. So they're using our software, and they can create whatever inspection or standard that they want to follow. And then there's also fire safe organizations, so fire safe councils,
Hmm.
NFPA Firewise communities that are being proactive. They're organizing their communities, and they need solutions for how they educate their neighbors. And they're also using our software. So we really span across the different efforts in here,
Hmm.
and that helps.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to look at. I've seen some of the imagery like many people have of just, how it spread so quickly. But if you have uh, a community effort around the home hardening and the land usage, you can reduce your risk. You're never going to completely, be able to say this won't happen, but there's proactive steps you can take to make your community more safe. You, yourself, your neighbors, etc. Um, what are some? I've seen the imagery around fires kind of going around areas. What are some success stories you've seen around land management, home hardening, etc.?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is we're finally starting to hear about those success stories. Whereas in the past it was all focused on the devastation that happens,
Hmm.
we are finally starting to see some success stories where people took action and homes survived. So just going in reverse chronological order, a couple weeks ago in Texas, the wildfires were the largest
Hmm.
in the state, burned over 1 million acres, and there was a town that had done a prescribed burn several months before for a 7 mile stretch. And that definitely, the fire stopped, and it did not threaten as many homes as it would have without that. And then going back even a couple more weeks recently, down in Chile, you mentioned South America. They've had
Hmm.
some really terrible wildfires. It's the peak of their season right now, and there was a community that 2 years ago had a wildfire nearby. They decided that they needed to take action. It was a neighborhood of about 40 homes, and they began doing clearing and hardening homes. And then this year, the wildfire burned up on three different sides. They're at the very top of a knoll, and the fire came at them from three sides. Not a single home burned. And
Wow.
had this been almost anywhere else, or had they not done that, I haven't met anybody yet in the wildfire space that thinks that they would have survived. So that was a really powerful lesson. And then the house in Lahaina,
Yeah.
terrible devastation that we saw, but there was that one home that stayed standing, and people called it the miracle house. But if you look at it, and we could share a link to the
Yeah.
webinar I did that breaks it down, but there was really nothing miraculous about that. They took a lot of actions. They were doing it for other reasons, like risk reduction, but they did a lot of the right things, and that helps explain it. So we do see these examples of where this science works and where people take action. It does have a big impact.
Yeah. There's the imagery which we'll cut in is truly amazing when you look at it. The one in Hawaii jumps out in my mind. Um, you can just see it go around as you walked us through it one time of just all the details that what was going on there um, with the property that helped reduce their risk, and you could see it very visually go around that house. On that note, if you're a homeowner in a risk area, um, what are some simple things? Say you have a constrained budget. What are some of the tips and tricks you pass out to those homeowners?
Yeah. So the first thing is just to kind of think about this to help you see it on your property, because studies show that it's really hard to take these concepts and just kind of apply them to our homes. So the first thing to think about is if you're going to start a fire or a fire in your fireplace, the steps are you take small needles, twigs, paper, and you get the fire going, and then you add larger pieces and larger pieces. So we want to think about that same concept when we're looking at the outside of our houses. So the things that are the easiest, honestly, that you could do in a weekend in a couple of hours, a lot of us have bark mulch right up next to our
Hmm.
homes. We also have maybe plants or bushes, trees that are right in the first 5 feet from around our houses and decks and anything else attached. And so if you can get 5 feet completely non-combustible all the way around like a moat, it
Hmm.
is very impactful in reducing your risk. You're gonna keep the fuels away and give yourself a much better chance of protecting your home. The another thing that's very common that we see that can be a minor modification is our wood privacy fences, right up next to the house. And we want that privacy, but and we can still have it, but that first 5 feet, 8 feet needs to be non-combustible. So there's some materials and options out there for folks who want to retrofit that don't cost too much. And the last thing are, wood piles, other combustible things that we store around the house. I see a lot of decorative, wood furniture or little cabinets or wood piles we mentioned. And we put them underneath the eaves, we put them underneath covered patios. And those are the things that are going to be the kindling that get going that then lead to us losing our houses. So certainly during the summer months, in most areas, not always, but whenever you have the wildfire risks and there's a red flag warning, you're going to have high wind and dry, low humidity. We want to be moving those things inside or in the garage or further out from our houses.
That makes a ton of sense, simple things, but um, as you frame it, just having dry mulch that close to your house, that's just a tinderbox if it's wildfires are happening. So Madronus, fairly young company. Um, Walk us through kind of the where Madronus is headed.
Yeah, so we got started here in 2021 in Sonoma County. We did some pilots. We got this great contract with the SoCo Adapts program. We're funded by FEMA. We've now done over 2,000 home inspections and valuations for wildfire risk. And we just signed with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety to be a wildfire prepared home partner. So we're going statewide. That's what's next for us. And there are rumors that wildfire prepared home might be coming to other states on the West Coast in particular. So watch for more there. On the technology side, we're continuing to innovate and add more features, and we'll be sharing some developments there soon.
Awesome. It's the problem you're going after is obviously not going away anytime soon. Um, on that note, what you look at a lot of the data, and I'm seeing it pop up in more states. Like, how widespread do they project, the risk of wildfire being, in the U.S.? Everybody feels like it's just California and Texas and parts of Colorado, but what's the bigger view over the next couple of years?
Well, unfortunately, we're in a growth market. We would rather we weren't, but the reality is we're going to continue to see hotter, drier climates and
Hmm.
bigger swings in precipitation and heat waves. And what really drives wildfire risk is how much rain did we have overall that kicked off the growth cycle, but then how much time goes between the last rain in spring and the first rain in fall. And I'm talking from a West Coast context here.
Yeah.
The same types of patterns get repeated, but the later out into the fall wildfire, the first rain happens, the greater the danger, the greater the risk. And those days and that environment is happening more and more. So certainly all of the West Coast states, but places like North Carolina, New Jersey, not many people know, but in 2016, a wildfire destroyed 2,000 homes in Tennessee. And
Mm.
the deadliest, largest wildfire ever was in northern Minnesota. And you look at places like Maine and the New England forests, they are dry tinderboxes, and they're very dense right now. So those are the areas that I would be most concerned about. But truthfully, there are few places in the United States that won't have a wildfire problem in 10 years.
Wow. Yeah, like you said, it's a growth industry, but you would prefer it not to be. But yeah, you guys educating, helping people get, you know, information they need to home harden, to better use their land, and doing it with technology to scale, um, is a must. Uh, what
Yeah.
else?
And just to add, sorry,
Yeah.
this is about feeling empowered. I think it's easy for us to lose hope, to feel
Mhm.
hopeless, and when we're confronted in the social media, we're doom scrolling. Um, yes, this is a challenge, but it doesn't cost a lot of money. There are real things that you can do, and you can have an impact. And like we talked about earlier, there are success stories, and a lot of what drives and motivates us to create. I mean, our mission is to create wildfire adapted communities, and so we're all about empowerment, making it simple, breaking it down, educating folks, and helping them, adapt to the new climate reality that we live in.
Yeah, that's an awesome mission, just because it can be or is so impactful, in getting more widespread, uh, of empowerment. Here's what you can do versus the feeling, you know, unempowered or just useless, so to speak. Of it's just going to happen. I can't do anything.
The things that we've had some real success stories around helping property owners keep their insurance
Mm.
by getting a wildfire risk evaluation. And then we were able to pair them with vetted contractors that are in our network. And, they got to keep their insurance policies. So that's what gets us out of bed, and really drives our mission. Um, this is also something that protects property values. I don't think a lot of people
Yeah.
understand how, from valuing real estate, if your insurance cost, if you get dropped or you don't have available coverage at an affordable price, there's a direct impact to your property value. And so that's something else that, we want to maintain the value of folks' homes and make sure it's done well and looks good. And then that's going to feed into maintaining your largest financial asset and your financial security. And then more broadly, our tax bases are based on property values in many
Yeah.
communities, and these fund our fire departments, our schools, our services. And so that's also why what motivates us.
Yeah. That all rolls up, um, in many ways to the community of pure safety, but also funding for everything else communities do. The tax base, can get, really sideways if you don't take these steps. Um, One fun question to ask everyone, what doesn't have to be five things, but what's inspiring you, motivating you, entertaining you, books, shows, podcasts, people. What are you getting inspired by lately? You mentioned one book already, which sounds pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
well, yeah. So in my spare time that I don't have, running a business, as you know, it takes a lot. Um, the reading stories about how the United States used to be, or how it was stewarded, I take a lot of hope in, and
Hmm.
that's what we know it could be done, or how it can be done. And so I've been studying and reading papers and following voices in that community, especially around prescribed fire and reintroducing fire to the land. So those communities in our area are very active. In fact, there's a listserv that gets put out, and they say, "Hey, who wants to come join us for a prescribed burn or controlled burn?" And it's hotter than a Taylor Swift concert ticket. You know, it's like within an hour, the list is full. So um,
Wow.
that's great. Um, Podcasts I follow. There's some great insurance industry ones out there. It's called the InsurTech Connected podcast. Keeps me up to date on what's happening in the world of insurance. And on a personal note, I'm currently looking for a new show. We're kind of in between episodes, but Acapulco on Apple TV is one of my favorites. I think it's just this really fun backdrop, a setting of a high end hotel in Mexico, and kind of it's bilingual and really fun and funny. All the situations that happen with the guests that come through. So that's my escape valve.
Nice. I haven't heard of that one. I have to check it out. Acapulco. Um, we had it's funny here in Chicago at one of the forest preserves it was either last weekend or weekend before there was a controlled burn. Um,
I'm
and
impressed.
it was driving towards it. I saw the smoke, and then there was signs saying, "Don't call the police. It's a controlled burn." And then you get there and you see kind of people monitoring and walking it. You can see where it started and kind of it got up to the road area, and that's kind of where it stopped. You can kind of see why it was stopping. But um, even in Illinois, they're trying to do their part.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but that's the stuff that really I find so encouraging and inspiring is to see that sort of being adopted and becoming widely accepted. Yes, there are smoke impacts. There are disruptions, and for many people who have gone through a wildfire, it can be traumatizing. It's triggering,
Mhm.
right? Um, But when we think about all of the benefits to the soil and to the environment, there are a lot of plants in the United States that are dependent on fire, especially in California. This is part of their life cycle, it's part of how they stay healthy. And it also sequesters carbon in the soil. We do lose some to the
Yeah.
atmosphere, but the remaining bit gets incorporated and that becomes fertilizer. And it's just this virtuous thing that has been missing for, in a lot of cases, 150 years. Due to changes in population and land management. So it's a time. It's an old idea whose time has come again. We want to burn when we want to, not when nature decides to.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you taking time. Appreciate all the work you and your team do. I know it's a monumental task, but I hear all the success you guys have. With the business, which has a broader success for communities at large and individuals. So it's keep up the good work.
We really do have a great team, and we're really happy to be working with you and the Digital Baltoro team as well. Thanks for having me on.